Your browser isn't just where you work, it's where the next cyber war is being fought. In this episode, we uncover why it's now the front line of both security and user experience.
Yeah, so I think, the browser has just quietly became like this new operating system where you're using like all your SaaS applications, you're using like, your all the confidential workflow. So that makes it, I would say, very powerful, at the same time, very exposed.
Welcome to the Design Rush podcast, where we unpack how top innovators are reshaping the future of design, business, and technology. I'm joined by Shourya Pratap Singh, Principal Software Engineer at SquareX, where he leads cutting-edge development in browser security. He's presented at DEF CON, Black Hat EU, and Texas Cyber Summit, holds a patent, and brings a rare blend of deep technical expertise and UX empathy to cybersecurity design. In this conversation, Shourya reveals why browsers are the new battleground, how invisible security design empowers users, and why empathy may be cybersecurity's most underrated asset. If you lead a B2B agency or brand team, hit subscribe. Every week, we share executive conversations on the strategies, design thinking, and leadership shaping agency growth. Welcome to the Design Rush podcast, Shourya. It's great to have you here. Shourya, you're leading one of the most interesting shifts in cybersecurity right now, where browser security and user experience are finally crossing paths. So today we're going to be diving into what that means for users, for teams, and also for the future of work inside the browser. So I'd like to start out asking you, everyone's online all day, but very few realize that the browser is actually the new battlefield. What shifted to make it the center of both security and user experience today?
Yeah, so I think, the browser has just quietly became like this new operating system where you're using like all your SaaS applications, you're using like, your all the confidential workflow. In fact, all the communication you do with everyone in your company outside also happens via the browser. So that makes it, I would say, very powerful, at the same time, very exposed. So attackers have, also realized that they don't really have to like target endpoints or, target other stuff. They just need to target on the browser. That's just one window that everyone trusts. And that's the reason why, for security point of view, this is very important. But like I said, with the rise of browser as the main operating system, even the design also is becoming very important. And that's because all the user interfaces need to be designed in a way that makes the whole productivity very easy. And that's where, I think browser sits at this kind of a crossroad where both security and, UX comes in. So, yeah.
Now, Shourya, when you joined SquareX, so what did you notice was fundamentally broken in the way the companies were thinking about browser security? And then what did you set out to actually rebuild from scratch?
Yeah, I think the biggest problem, I would say, in the traditional mindset was that most companies treated browser as like a passive tool, not like an active attack surface. And their notion was like, you just need to protect the network, you just need to protect the endpoint, and the browser will just take care of itself. So I think that was one thing which we felt was broken. And everyone needs to understand that all the modern attacks happen via the browser, let it be phishing, downloading files from the internet, any kind of exploitation anyone is doing, everything is happening via the browser. So that's what we are doing. So we are just trying to, rebuild the trust at the browser level.
Would you say then that there was maybe like a real world incident or browser threat that completely changed how your team thought about, what true user protection should actually feel like for you to actually get to this point of saying, this is where we are, and this is what should be happening?
So I think it's not not just one incident has happened, like multiple over the time. So even when we were just starting off, as a company, at that point, we used to notice how, different attachments of office documents that used to come over the email. Most of the email vendors will just go about saying like scanned by Gmail or scanned by Microsoft, whatever it is. And people will just trust it blindly and download it. Similarly, very recently, there was this attack that happened with, another cybersecurity company where, one of the developers, they received an email, and that email has like a very, convincing email saying that, your extension is going down. They just clicked on that link and that link immediately redirected to a Google link, and it was asking permission to take over the permission of pushing a new software. So as a technical expert, people will just look at the address bar and say like, hey, it's a Google URL, like what could go wrong? They will go ahead and give that allowed permission, and that would lead to their both company getting affected because of it, because it was just a consent attack where someone gave consent to a malicious application via the Google, and that ended up taking over their account. So I feel all these different events happening have sort of inspired us to make sure that we are building something that protect all these things.
Security is all about control, right? While your UX is about freedom, because you want that freedom. So how do you actually merge those two worlds without losing the magic of either?
Yeah, so I think that's a very, I would say, difficult problem to solve. But what's really important is to think of it like a, I would say, invisible containment, not like a visible restriction. Because the more you go about, showing a lot of constraints to the user, like you can't do that, that this is expected to slow down and things like that, that would just be bad for people, because, that's what they don't expect. They want everything to go smoothly. So I think what's really important is to not just think about security in the point of control, but also in the form of like how to make it in a way that it's easier for user to do things. So I would say it has to be better. I'm saying like it's important to create a balance between the two.
If you're looking at like the user experience itself, do you think that awareness around this needs to be increased, that people are maybe also not that much aware? I mean, for you and I, as consumers of the online platforms and the online services that are provided, it's something that's kind of like always top of mind. But for most out there, it's perhaps not.
Absolutely. There has to be a lot of awareness, and that goes for like any company, and that goes like for any individual as well. For individuals, of course, they have to be very careful about what they do, what kind of extensions they install on their browser and things like that. But even for like business leaders, they have to consider browser security as something really important.
What's one big misconception that business leaders still have about how important the browser really is to your enterprise security? How do you usually set them straight?
So I think the biggest misconception that many business leaders often have is that they just believe that browser attacks are just user mistakes. They just have like phishing links, weak passwords. So it's all on user. But the reality is I would say the browsers have progressed a lot now. So they are not just places where people can make mistakes, but it also a fully programmable attack surface. So you can have cases where you have just opened a page, everything looks legit from a user point of view, and it's not really user's fault, but there is something let's say a JavaScript library loaded on the page, and that library is compromised. So it's not really something that user is doing, but maybe the website is using some third party thing, and that gets compromised. So we have to understand the whole environment itself is fully programmable, and that makes it a really complex attack surface in itself. It's not just user making.
So it's your responsibility as a leader within the organization to ensure that the protocols are there, that you have made sure that the experience is safe for the company and for your staff as a whole, but then also to provide that education, I would guess, then to actually, let your team members know that, these are the X, the Y's, and the Z's of what needs to be done to ensure that you're always being safe and that security is always top of mind, right?
Yes, absolutely. I think it's everyone has a role to play. So even organizations also need to make sure that at least the parts where the user is responsible for, that part is clearly they are clearly educated and they're clearly informed about.
You were talking earlier about security being invisible. How do you make something that powerful feel completely effortless for the user?
Yeah, so I think it's all about thinking. When we are starting to build a product, it's really important to maybe start with some empathy, because users just don't wake up in the morning and think hey, I'm gonna have a very secure web browsing today. That's not something anyone thinks about. They just want their browser to work. They just want their so So that's what we are trying to do. Like, we are trying to make sure that their browser works at the same time they are secure.
A lot of dev teams actually end up breaking the user experience while trying to make things safer. So, where does that usually happen, and how does your team actually avoid falling into that trap?
Yeah, so I think in case of us, since we are a security company, it's really important for us to make sure that like security and the UX is going hands on hands. It's not something you can think either of them as an afterthought. So and especially when we are working on the browser, that thing becomes like really important. But in general, if we are talking about dev teams, uh, often it happens that uh, if it's a security company, the UX becomes an afterthought, and if it's a company which is not related to security becomes an afterthought. So I think it's really important to consider both of them at the same time while building or architecting anything as a developer.
SquareX's whole pitch is that users don't have to change a thing, which is a very bold promise. So, what made that actually possible behind the scenes?
I think when we were starting to build this product, one of the first things that we were trying to figure out was how we can make it in a way it's really powerful, at the same time very seamless for anyone to install or use or anything like that. So for end users, ideally they would want something that is just done without having to them take multiple steps. You get a fresh laptop out of your company as an employee. You would not want to spend a lot of time installing security products which you will not even use by yourself. So it's really important that it's provisioned and it's auto installed in a way the company admins can easily control, and it's still visible to you, so you can open your browser and see that this is a company operated browser profile and it's being managed by Square. So you have that transparency in front of you as well. But as a user, you don't really have to take any action. You don't have to log in into that software. You don't have to install that software or anything like that. And the best part was we also thought how can we make it in a way that it's even more seamless. So we thought we can really build it in a way that it's installed inside the browser. So we went ahead with the extension approach. So we ourselves became like an extension and not like a full software running outside.
I'm sure you'll agree with me that most security products actually sound exactly the same. So from your side, just sort of building on SquareX itself, how do you make SquareX stand out and then still feel human and relatable at the same time?
Yeah, I think what makes us very different, I would say, from any security company out of you is probably, I would say, the fact that, like I said about the user empathy, we understand, it's really important to consider that when you're building security products, to make sure, every feature is really thought about. I'll tell you an example. There is this thing called as browser isolation that has been existing for quite some time. And what happens in that is that, let's say there's a website which is, I would say, a little risky. So instead of opening it on your browser, security products run it on a cloud browser. And then they project what is happening on that browser on your screen so that any malicious script runs on that browser rather than your actual browser. But the problem with that is since there's a cloud streaming kind of thing, it breaks your experience. So when we were designing this feature, this something similar to that, what we did was that we thought hey, we want to make sure no website is slowed down when this is happening. So other than just spending time on the tech itself, we also made sure that only the websites that look suspicious are going into that flow, not your usual trusted website that you use on a daily basis. So all these small things add up and make sure that gives that bit of human touch and they feel like everything is working smoothly.
My next question to you is, when even Amazon's cloud can go down, it really highlights how fragile modern stacks can be. So from an engineering standpoint, how do you design systems that stay secure and functional when, the critical infrastructure itself fails?
So I think, as anyone from the engineering side, it's really important to understand and, it's really important to assume that everything will fail. Unless we have that kind of assumption, we can't really design systems that can handle such kind of situations. And often, it's also possible in certain scenarios to maybe, do certain things outside or being reliant on that provider. In some cases, it gives that ease, but in some cases, it might be possible as well. I'll give you an example. Like in our case, since we are a security product, it's really important for us to run all the time. Because let's say, we are reliant on some cloud service, and if that cloud service goes down, we can't just give that reasoning saying like, hey, because of that, someone was able to open a malicious link. We cannot say that. So what's really important in this case, like what we did was that we figured out like what are the critical things and how many of these things we can do on the client side. So that way, like, even if our service gets down, we can continue using the previously enforced policies and make sure that, other things are being taken care of. And when the service goes back live, we will start sending the data back. So what I'm trying to say is really important to assume that parts of your service will get failed. And it's really important to build systems in a way that I would say everything is engineered, I would say, for continuity rather than like a perfect situation.
I love that assumption because what it does is it already builds your mind around what the solution would be before you've even commenced with anything. And to have that kind of mindset, it's almost like it provides you with the safer foundation, to move forward. Shourya, there's actually been a lot of talk about doing more with less. Even Amazon has actually been trimming back and they talking like a startup again. So from a product engineering point of view, how can smaller teams, like you would say, actually stay innovative and secure when they're forced to work lean? Does it like actually change the environment, in essence? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really important for smaller teams, or I would say lean teams, to go ahead and run like quick experiments. Like something that really happens with larger sizes of team is that they have to think very long before they're running an experiment. So that's an advantage that often comes up with smaller teams. Another thing that comes in is that you can work very closely with the customers. So it's really good, and it's really, I would say, good that developers often get a chance to stay very close to the customers. And because of that, they can run all these experiments very quickly, get the feedback and the relevant data for it, and then use it to guide the next set of decisions that they're going to take. So I would say that for any lean size team, this would be the best strategy going forward. And it's really also important to automate all the routine work as they can. So overall, it's about doing the right things smarter and faster.
I'm actually curious to find out from you if constraint, sometimes makes security design better. Would you say it does or it doesn't? What is your take on that? Yeah.
I think I would say that we can say that it kind of forces some clarity, because you can't just throw resources at every problem. So you need to focus on the principles that really scale, which could be like things like having like simplicity in the overall system itself. And I feel that often too complex systems lead to like insecure systems as well. So it's, if you look at it from that perspective, then I feel that constraints can bring some clarity, keep systems simple, and can make it like slightly more secure.
There's also a recent thread which analyzed 47 failed startups and found that most struggled with technical debt and product misalignment. So from your perspective, what I would like to find out is what are the early technical or architectural choices that you would say set a product up for long-term success or failure?
So I think what really happens with any kind of startup is that when they start, of course, the team size is small, right? And later, you get more expertise as people start joining the company. And then over time, you also learn from product feedback from customers, and a couple of things. So oftentimes, many times, many assumptions that you make at start of the product might keep changing. And the same goes for any kind of technical architecture as well. You would think that what you're designing on the very first day is like the perfect thing that's going to cover everything, but that's not true. We'll definitely make that. And that's where the tech debt comes in. So I think what's really important is, from my perspective, focusing on two things. One is like focusing a bit on documenting the architecture. Like let's say you're making something initially, you should write down like why really you took that decision, so that in future if something new comes up, to backtrack and figure out like what was the main reason of designing it this way, so that further iterations are also documented well. So first I would say would be like just documenting the architecture would be like one good decision. Second would be like some level of observability. Like for example, let's say if something is running, uh, how well it's running, how many failures are happening. So having like right set of like visibility on what's really going around. And as more customers come in, as more users come in, that becomes really really important, because you cannot just call down the customer and ask like, are you facing any issues? So these two I think really really helps people avoid like more tech debt going forward.
I like what you've raised right now, and I'm actually wondering if you have perhaps seen like, or if you could change rather, one engineering habit that you see repeated across teams. Like, what would that ultimately be for you?
Yeah, I think that has to be like thinking that refactoring the code, or like doing changes or picking any tech debt projects is optional. So many teams like consider refactoring as an optional thing, but I feel that it's often important to also nurture like refactors as part of the engineering development efforts. Oftentimes, as I said, like you keep on changing things in the architecture itself as you get more feedback, as you get more context when you're building the product. So of course, like more changes will come in, and that makes a system complex because you're focused on just building new features, making patches on top of an existing system, making it more complex, making it more fragile, which is absolutely fine for small teams and small companies. But it's also important to spend a small portion of time on the refactoring, so that things remain simple, understandable, and not too fragile as new things are coming in.
Totally hearing you there. So then, if you were to sort of add on to that, and perhaps say, if every company could make just one change tomorrow to actually make their browser experience safer, what do you think that would be, and also why would you choose that?
I think the very first thing is to take browser security as something serious, because like I said, there have been cases where people have this mindset that they only need to protect the endpoint and the network, and browser will take care of itself. So they need to stop thinking that and consider the importance of having a protection layer on top of their browser. That's like the very first change in mindset that any company needs to do. And then second is going forward and looking at what kind of extensions the employees are using, what kind of SaaS applications they're using, and then going forward and looking at at a visible layer what's really happening in the organization. That will give them a better picture about making the browser secure.
Oh, fantastic. Shourya, do you have any parting words for our Design Rush audience today? Anything else you'd like to add?
I would just say that it's important to have that user empathy before you're building any kind of security products.
Shourya, this has been such an insightful look into the next frontier of browser security. Thanks for breaking down what's happening behind the scenes. Really appreciate your time here today. Thank you for joining us on the Design Rush podcast.
Thank you.
Curious about what top brands look for when choosing an agency? Tune into our latest episodes where we reveal the decision-making secrets of leading brands. Subscribe to the Design Rush podcast and stay ahead of the competition.